I tried to upload this video earlier today, and now I have a copyright strike requested directly by my favorite indie company, Black Eye Games. I took out that specific part YouTube pointed at, but it was just a public gameplay video from their Kickstarter, so the rest of this video is likely vulnerable. Let's try this again. Gloria Victis, the open-world medieval MMORPG, officially releases February 7th of this year, 2023. Before you make the decision to purchase this game and support its developers, let's get to know the team behind it and dive into the history of Gloria Victis. There's so much you would never know, and it's because the team at Black Eye Games doesn't want you to. In fact, talking to other players in this game might even give you the feeling that its entire history has been rewritten. Debates as to when the game was created, how many developers they have, who even made the game compelled me to dive down the rabbit hole and discover the truth. My name is Macy, and if you end up enjoying this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Let's get into it. Black Eye Games is an indie studio that unites over 30 experienced developers. Some of them were part of the teams that brought you The Witcher or Neverwinter Nights. Among them are also team members who are working as software engineers in huge corporations such as Motorola Solutions Poland. Creating and sharing free, high-quality games packed with ingenious plots and industry-standard assets has been their goal since 2008. In order to meet this goal, they incessantly train their skills to complete ambitious projects using bleeding-edge technology. Fascinating. Black Eye Games started publicly developing Gloria Victis as early as 2008, under the game's original name Etherfields. For at least 3 full years, this would be the name of their project. Their head programmer and team leader was Sangmar, who also created the game's engine, Baroque, completely from scratch. It was absolutely crucial they built their game on a proprietary engine if they wanted to surpass technological thresholds that contained even AAA titles. At the time, companies were still making better MMOs on Flash, and even Unity was extremely disliked by big-name developers and gaming fans. Fortunately for Black Eye Games, Sangmar had been working on Baroque engine since high school. While the team's visions were always rather unrealistic for video game standards even today, Sangmar's prowess in programming gave them a fighting chance. Throughout development, they tried very hard to be transparent to their community, throwing up the server as frequently as possible. December 3rd, 2011, the server officially went live 24/7. Development was ramping up, and there were already talks about releasing the game as early as 2012.
Dziś opowiadać będę ja, Saga. Jestem team liderem, jak także programistą silnika, na którym działa nasza gra. Jako że zajmuję się stricte technologicznymi aspektami produkcji, na pierwszy plan chciałem przedstawić nowy system chmur, który jakiś czas temu zawitał w grze. Chmury te są generowane losowo, płyną po niebie zgodnie z obowiązującym kierunkiem wiatru oraz zmieniają się w czasie, co widać na przyspieszonym 10-krotnie filmie. Jest także poprawka efektów God Rays, które nie rozjaśniają całego ekranu gry, skupiają więc efekt światła wyłącznie w obrębie pozycji słońca. Kolejna ciekawa poprawka to całkowicie przebudowane efekty Ambient Occlusion, potocznie nazywany SSAO. Udoskonalony i zoptymalizowany został shader wody, który teraz dużo lepiej oblicza efekty odbić i refleksów słonecznych. Dodaliśmy klawisz funkcyjny E, którym możemy wykonywać akcje na obiektach, do których się zbliżymy. Czy to przebudowany został system dialogów z postaciami, nie tylko wizualnie, ale i technicznie. Jok na nowo opracowuje mówione dialogi, więc wkrótce w grze sporo postaci przemówi. W blogu czy koncie na Facebooku. Do następnego razu. Hej!
The very next month, January of 2012, Sangmar had a falling out with his colleagues. Jog Brokowski, the biggest link between the core band of friends, had stepped up behind the scenes as the unofficial boss of the team. Jog believed the game's development was moving far too slow due to the exclusivity of their engine. Sangmar tackled many of the responsibilities of coding and programming himself because unfortunately Baroque engine was far too complex for their team of amateurs. After discussing with the rest of the team, Jog told Sagasil he needed to translate the game over to Unity to allow more members to work on the game. Sagasil did not believe the goals and visions they had could be accomplished with the Unity engine, so he chose to leave. His last and only request to Jog was that they change the game name to differentiate the project from Etherfields. Sagasil broke the news to the community himself, telling them all that Etherfields was dead, and that the rest of his colleagues would be continuing a new and separate project using Unity. Even though Jog had agreed to these terms, he responded very angrily to the post from Sagasil, saying Etherfields was not dead, and it would be the exact same project they were currently working on, just under a different name. The message I'm showing is Jog on their public company page responding to Sagasil on the public Etherfield page. This is extremely unprofessional first off. Secondly, in considering Sagasil agreed to leave, this post is meant to smear Sagasil of all credibility moving forward. Down near the bottom, Jog says, P.S. In our opinion, Camille's behavior is very immature, including closing the forum, writing RIP as if the project collapsed, but clearly showing the main problem of the bad cooperation of the whole team with Sagasil. The person who was perceived as the leader of the group did not make any organizational decisions, and the work of a specially appointed board, in which Camille was the chairman, was limited, only to constant attempts to motivate him as a programmer to create a game. If Camille decides that he wants to continue the project with us, the door will be open to him. Yeah, I don't think he's going to want to come back after this. This is the first example we have of the Black Eye Games CEO, Jog, behaving or responding in an inappropriate manner. Something that would become a consistent behavioral pattern for him over the next 11 years as he continued to lead development for their newly named MMORPG, Gloria Victis. 2012 was a busy year for Black Eye Games. A good portion of their Polish fanbase had turned their backs on them to show support for Sagasil, or to boycott the switch to Unity. This meant they had to additionally focus on rebuilding public relations. They began building hype for Gloria Victis through gaming conventions and MMO forums. On November 1st, 2012, Black Eye Games started their Kickstarter campaign to finish crowdfunding their game. Because players today don't know the history of the game, to some, this is the beginning of Gloria Victis. To others, actually to most, it's as late as 2016, which at that point is just ridiculous. The 2012 Kickstarter for Gloria Victis looked like a dream. They detailed the most captivating, innovative, and most importantly interactive game of all time. It was even more advanced than Etherfields was. This was going to be the game to save MMORPGs from the downward trend that's gotten us to where we are today. They had absolutely everything. A non-linear multi-plot story defined by your character's reputation for people who enjoy storylines, skill-based directional non-target attack combos, and special blows for the combat fanatics, minigames that yield additional rewards, and very in-depth crafting systems for the farmers and crafters, horse taming and lance tournaments for the equestrian lovers, open PvP, sieges, friendly fire, and loot for all the hardcore PvPers. They literally had everything! So then why? Why did the Kickstarter fail? It wasn't an issue with the tier rewards. They had it covered here. So then what was it? How could it have failed? It looked so good on paper. Well, for starters, 75,000 euros, although it's puny for the totality of costs surrounding MMORPGs, can still be hard for small companies to campaign for. Not that 30 is small at all. It's no surprise that Black Eye Games, given their alleged smear campaign on their beloved creator of their game, would see their Kickstarter fail. Perhaps it wasn't that though. Gloria Victis, unlike Etherfields, was being marketed heavy from the start towards English-speaking audiences. This gave JOG a real chance to find funding to succeed without Sagasil carrying the project. Ideally, an MMORPG needs a good business model that will allow it to fund itself after the Kickstarter gives it its wings. Black Eye Games, however, boasted Gloria Victis would be free to play. It actually has since Etherfields, and it's obvious to me their eyes were bigger than their wallets. The difference between EF and GV is that you can sell the license to your proprietary engine. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you pay for Unities. If not for the obvious lie about the pay model, then maybe just the fact that the Kickstarter, in typical indie fashion, was literally too good to be true. It's likely nobody on the team had the experience or the foresight to know the limitations they were setting themselves up for by making so many promises. Surely there were people who saw this as disingenuous marketing. Another problem that caused their Kickstarter to fail was an issue with payment processing. This made it difficult for people in America to contribute. A third reason their Kickstarter failed, or so the CEO of Black Eye Games proclaims, Greedmonger had started their campaign around the same time with a lower goal and a quicker delivery date. I don't know if he expected free reign on Kickstarter, but really I see this as another example of JOG behaving inappropriately. Take accountability for your failures and move forward. There were things you could have done better, but you didn't. Now, in the end, I don't think JOG was too upset about any of this. They used their Kickstarter to successfully network their way into new opportunities, and also managed to acquire a partnership with Plymouth University. This means on top of their sponsorships, they had yet another means to fund the game, or at the very least, the marketing for it. The team runs into lots of issues regarding development in 2012 and 2013. They were clearly lost without their former leader, and having to rewrite mechanics from scratch was proving to be quite difficult for their team of 30 experienced developers. Despite having released Sagasil for not progressing the game fast enough, development was still rather slow. They focused on making sure the money they were getting from Plymouth University was being used towards creating a product they could all be proud of. Examples are Shock Scarred Anti-Cheat being built in tandem with Gloria Victis, or motion capture technology being used to perfect animations. As long as the final product was going to look beautiful, I don't think anybody would have had a problem waiting. On October 26, 2013, they were able to establish Black Eye Games as an official company in London and start paying employees. On April 5th, they opened the game back up for the first time since Etherfields the previous year, but this time for a price. I believe it was $20. This was initially part of the VIP account package for their forums. The game was still being advertised as free to play and would continue to be until 2017. JOG says in an interview with Garrett Fuller of MMORPG.com that the only way to keep an open PvP game populated for years is to keep it free to play. This is clearly before JOG lost his damn mind fighting with this community, when he still wanted to be the people's champion. Like I said though, this model was never going to work.
We are an independent project and do not have the luxury of multi-million-dollar budgets that studios enjoy. This is why we need your support. So if you too share the vision of a realistic game, if you too support a developer that acknowledges that gamers own a project as much as the developers do, and if you too believe in the passion as a drive, then support us. Support us by spreading the word about this project. Tell your friends, family, or even your creepy neighbor about us. Or go one step further and take a direct involvement in the development by offering your skills and expertise. Gloria Victis, a game developed by gamers, with gamers, for gamers.
February 8th, 2014, Gloria Victis debuted on Steam Greenlight in an attempt to expand the game's audience, still being advertised as free to play. It makes sense if you remember how popular free MMOs were during this time period. They pretty much dominated the market. Anyways, the Greenlight was a huge success and boosted Gloria Victis' popularity to a new level. If the name ever sounded familiar, it's probably because GV had legitimate traction coming off of their successful Greenlight. Pre-alpha development continued into alpha and onward for the next 2 years. Without a solid PR team, 2 years can be a long time to tease your game. Black Eye Games tried to carry the hype by promising features they would never deliver on. Boats, flaming ammunition, and active abilities are only a few of many. On June 9th, 2016, over 2 years after they were greenlit, their game finally gets put up on the Steam store page for early access. Black Eye Games announced this as the official early access phase of Gloria Victis, as if it wasn't already early access. But hey, do what you gotta do to market your product. The game was still at this time being branded as free to play. It's crazy. Fortunately, it had seen many outstanding visual and performative improvements, and this was ideal for selling people on an unfinished product, since they still needed more money to make the push to full release. They received a very small pop in players for MMO standards, but it was enough to push their servers to the limit. A plethora of bugs and disconnections were experienced by all users, and their Steam population immediately faltered back below 100. I imagine there were still 20 to 30 players using the original client, so realistically they're probably averaging 100. This ends up being perfect for their network limitations, and they use this as an opportunity to hone in on a tiny but dedicated group of supporters. Gloria Victis at the time did keep their players involved in the development process. You have to give them credit. They were doing a fantastic job at targeting classic RPG fans, as well as hardcore PvPers. The GV community was truly a tight-knit one too. Many people do not understand the value of a small community in MMORPGs. When you are surrounded by too many players, you are just another body in a big ocean of useless minnows. What you do doesn't matter, what you say has no weight. This isn't how Black Eye Games wanted their players to feel. They wanted everybody to feel included, as good indie devs would. And like I said, they did this well, or at least at first. The kind of criticism Jog received started to change very quickly. The publicity he was getting from having his game public on Steam was rather undesirable, as he felt incoming players were too quick to judge, and whenever he tried changing the game for the new players, his small dedicated fanbase would in turn lash out. He just couldn't win. There were also a good portion of players who spent most of their time trolling, simply because the game was a little goofy and glitchy. This also upset Jog, because the environment of GV was supposed to be centered around realism, partial roleplay, and hardcore gaming. Trolling was spitting on the face of every core belief he built their game upon. With that being said, 2016 was the start of massive improvements that even further elevated Gloria Victis, but unfortunately was also the beginning of the degradation of Jog's mental state.
Is it gonna stay $20 or is it gonna go up?
No, it's going to go free to play, but there is going to be more of a free to play trial. So one of the biggest differences between weapons could be active abilities, grabbing the actual weapon itself and stabbing with a point in a different way, or flipping the entire weapon over and hitting with the pommel end, the end of the actual the handle of the longsword. There also will be other different mounts, such as donkeys. So you can actually use and ride donkeys. You might also be able to possibly store extra inventory space in them. Every inventory space will be regional. You have to take it by ship, and of course those ships can be raided, and that leads us, I guess, into naval combat. So you also will be able to transfer the entire guild power and rent out specific locations in the entire territory. But to answer the question about minigames, yeah, there will be some. Perhaps some sort of card games, for instance. The game will be going on the feudal system, so there definitely will be a big hierarchy system. There will be also some sort of survival elements, such as a hunger system, or if you're out in the rain or the cold, you might want to put on a cloak. If you're in the rain or in the snow, you want to put on a cloak. But if you're out in the desert somewhere, you might want to tone it down a bit with your armor.
Yeah.
In fact, with NPCs, they will have their own little actions as well. So, for instance, if you leave a castle unkept, they will come and raid you.
Will there be more kinds of different shields one day?
Yeah, it's possible, especially with crossbows coming up. You'll likely see some ability to put your little guild emblem on your gambeson, or if you want, or your tabard actually. Being seen behind walls, for example, will eventually be fixed. For a two-handed weapon, or any kind of sword, for instance, hitting through plate armor, that will be changed once something like active abilities are introduced with half sorting and such.
2 years later, from November 2018 to October 2018, Black Eye Games ran a sale that effectively and permanently boosted Gloria Victis' population by 200 players. This time, when players tried the game, sure, there were still plenty of bugs, but it ran significantly smoother. Small to medium scale combat was no longer choppy and unresponsive, and it turned out when you could actually fight fluently, that the game's PvP was addictingly fun. I'd go as far as to say it was ahead of its time. Not many games dabbled in directional combat, and if we disregard the exclusion of a feature called fluid blocking, this was by far the best. Now, this isn't to say that the player base didn't already consist of PvPers, it certainly did, but the inconsistencies in combat made it hard to enjoy. It also made it difficult to define a skill floor and skill ceiling. Since that had been established, an avenue was created to market their game even further in the direction of hardcore PvPers. If we look back on the Kickstarter, this was never supposed to be Gloria Victis' main gig. They described the game as a blend of Gothic and The Witcher, which heavily favor their storyline and atmosphere. They even compared it to Baldur's Gate, which carries complex but classic RPG elements. With PvP being the clear focus, the game was more comparable to a medieval planetside. The boost in population brought even more criticism to Gloria Victis. This had a seriously negative effect on Jog and his team. They felt the reception of the game was no longer relevant to the amount of progress GV had seen over the past 10 years, that's a decade, and that players were simply just trying to sabotage their game. This gave them the ultimate excuse to run defense on their review page 24/7, going as far as to abuse the leniency Steam provides to indie developers and combating review bombs just to get popular negative reviews taken down. They would also ban critics from their Reddit and delete posts from their forums. Operation Saving Face was officially underway. After yet another 2 years, 12 years of development in total, on December 2nd of 2020, Gloria Victis announced they were finally leaving their early access phase and entering their beta phase. In those 2 years, they most importantly improved desync, tweaked combat balance, and spent most of their time adding new features and content into the game. Horses, fishing, minigames, free building, and many more. PvP as a priority had fallen down on the list, and some players were upset about the lack of urgency in fixing game-breaking bugs. Overall, PvP was still in a good place, but the recent gutting of the criminal system was an alarming sign for most. Up to this point, Gloria Victis was always branded as an open PvP game with persistent warfare and freedom to decide your own fate. Removing the criminal system on behalf of the complaints of new players was just one of many changes that uprooted the very foundation of the game. This became a clear and consistent goal for Jog, because at some point, he decided he no longer valued his dedicated player base, and wanted to expand to more casual and less judgmental fans. Jog started tearing up his game, with no fear of the consequences. Out with the old, in with the new. A last minute pit stop to scrap the entire model and haul in something brand new. It was absurd to most, but to Black Eye Games it made sense. Some of the core changes that came before and during beta were as follows. Mounted combat was introduced and severely unbalanced. It's either way too strong for the game or far too useless. Loot zones were removed from majority of the map as well as specific PvP events. Nation chat was turned into a restricted announcements channel. This, with the introduction of the Party Finder tool, has disincentivized social interaction and can make the game feel dead. I'll use this moment to say the game used to also have proximity text chat between opposing nations, and I think this was a brilliant idea they ended up scrapping. Free building was a controversial update that looks good to anybody who hasn't played GV because it aligns with sandbox motives. However, that's not the type of game this is, nor is that the feeling this tool emulates. Unrealistic castle designs typically force the slowest method of attack, making Gloria Victis' most prized and unique feature of their game the most boring. Combat mode was updated to lock players in place during battle, eliminating a very elusive playstyle that helped good players win outnumbered battles. Chambering was added with an inexcusably large window for success. This is intentional by the developers to allow new players to accidentally chamber attacks while spamming and increase their chances of leaving a battle victorious. Criminal or traitor mode was restricted, and Black Eye Games began threatening to ban players for using friendly fire. I think everybody was shocked by this because if they didn't want it in the game, they should have removed it. But also the criminal playstyle and ability to betray your own nation was advertised as one of this game's features. Similarly, spying on other nations became a bannable offense, even though in my opinion espionage fits the realism theme and partial roleplay goals Gloria Victis once had. PvE was hardcore tweaked to rid the game of solo play in an effort to force players into partying up. Less experience is gained, and mobs are made much harder to kill. In many cases, it's impossible without a friend or two. This is obviously bad because Gloria Victis is a low population game with its only activity centered around prime times. They even started watching players do events solo to try to patch the particular methods they use to complete said event. That's insanity. Despite their South American community being very dedicated players who log in every week, they wanted to force them into the North American server to improve activity there. So they nuked the SA server and all of their guild castles and never spoke about it again. Redesigned the map and made traveling on horse truly painful due to the way they interact with small hills and bumps. Expanded the content of the game simply by increasing the amount of time it takes to accomplish things. For example, adding new recipes in order to create already existing recipes. This would be to increase how long it takes to create an item without actually doing anything new. Another example is mastery progression, which forces you to repeat tasks over and over again just to unlock the ability to create or use new things. Reworked the nation point system. Nation points are received when you kill real players, and lost when you die to them. To make new players feel good about dying, they changed it so you do not lose nation points when you specifically feed kills to your enemies. Only after the first death will you lose some, and not again until you gain more. You also do not fall into the negative numbers anymore. They made it so that all of a player's alt accounts had to be in the same guild. No more assisting multiple guilds in a nation, and no more hiding your alt account's identity. Added blocking endurance that limits the number of blocks you're allowed to do in succession without swinging back. Black Eye Games gets daily reports from noobs who think that a player that can block 3 clowns at once has to be using some sort of cheat. These players never last long. In an attempt to retain these players, they've gutted the possibility to block multiple people many times. Removed guild castles and state of wars for the holiday with nothing to replace it with. I really thought this was going to get updated on full release, but it's not. They still don't have anything for it. They're just going to release the game. The game's not ready. What the... Okay, whatever. This last change is the most important in my mind because it shows exactly how little the developers value the experience and opinions of their loyal veteran players who have helped them fund the game. This change decimates a lot of versatility and range of skill that went into PvPing. It shatters the skill floor and closes the skill gap, and by definition, makes Gloria Victis less of a skill-based game. Leading up to this specific change in 2021, there was a mechanic called green swings in place. Green swings were quick attacks from tapping the attack button, as opposed to holding the attack button to charge the power of your swing. Although green swings were quick, the trade-off was if your enemy blocked your green swing, you would then be staggered and open for a counterattack. Largely because MMO players nowadays just spam click or mash keys as fast as they can, they have literally no clue what a skill-based MMORPG would even entail. Obviously, when they purchase Gloria Victis, they do the same exact thing and expect it to work. The green swing mechanic made sure those dumb noobs stayed dumb noobs, and players genuinely interested in training and learning the game would get better. On July 29th, 2021, against the community's wishes, they removed green swings from the game. All attacks start semi-charged now, and there are no more light swing staggers. Of course, this had a negative effect across all forms of battle. 1v1s, small group fights, large sieges. The quality of combat had already been on a downward trend for a couple of years, but this change was the nail in the coffin. The year is 2023, damn it. Gloria Victis has been in development for 13 years. Despite the weekly updates, the community polls, and Operation Saving Face, the medieval open world MMORPG Gloria Victis is on a downward trend. If you've made it this far in the video, then the reason is obvious. Creating the game for so long in tandem with the community, then stepping on the brakes and putting it in reverse has obviously had its consequences. I suppose the question now is, why would Jog, the CEO of Black Eye Games, make such a punishing decision? Well, earlier I briefly mentioned that the criticism growing increasingly louder due to publicity from Steam and various indie awards was causing Jog and his colleagues to act rather childish. Instead of accepting feedback, they fought against it. Instead of ignoring trolls, they fed into them. On the opposite side, if you praise their game enough, you are rewarded, as a means to incentivize others to do the same, but it's not working. The way they choose to interact with the public is blatantly inappropriate as an official company, and quite frankly deceptive as hell. They don't try to hide it either. They're trying to build a cult-like following, and this cult-like following should defend them. It makes sense now why former leader Sagasil and Jog had their differences. Saga was transparent and very much invested in expanding the limitations of gaming to make their goals possible. He knew it would take time. Jog was a greedy little clout goblin who sold out to the hype, and when he couldn't live up to the expectations, blamed it on the community rather than himself. I'm willing to bet nobody in this community has seen Jog take accountability for his actions a single time. We've seen him blame Sagasil for being too slow, Greedmonger for stealing their Kickstarter campaign, and the Russian invasion on Ukraine? I'm only kidding, that was the former community manager Damon Frey. Jog fired him after fucking his wife. Just a reminder to everybody that your boss is not your friend. Keep those relationships separate. My conclusion on the matter, and this is clearly my opinion, is that this company does not deserve your support. From stealing time and money from innocent customers, to banning players who leave negative reviews, to being flat out disrespectful and childish, Jog and his company Black Eye Games have done very little right with handling their community. As far as their video game itself goes, I do believe at one point in time it was close to full release standards, but that opportunity has long passed, and the game will only continue to degrade from here on out. By all means, feel free to try out the game, but I'd be a dirtbag if I didn't warn you guys to keep that refund in the back of your mind. Gloria Victis is my favorite game of all time, but for no reasons that would make it comparable to a AAA title. I've really fallen in love with just the vibe the game gives. Jog is a wonderful musician, and everything seems to flow in a way that keeps me entertained for hours on end. Personally, that's all I need. And although it saddens me to see the gameplay and PvP get worse, I'll likely play the game until the very day it's shut down. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you swampers enjoyed, and maybe I'll see you in the game.